when are we to give? When are we to give? We are to give when we worship. In 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 2, a passage that we read, says, upon the first day of the week. And the Greek there expressing every first day of the week. Every first day of the week. Every first day of the week we are to give as we have prospered as an act of worship to God. And next, or subpoint under this, we're to give as we have opportunity. If we go to Galatians 6, verse 10. Galatians 6 and 10, it says, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. So giving as an act of worship done on the first day of the week, but also as we have opportunity. For example, we sing on the first day of the week, but it's not wrong to sing on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. So as an act of worship, we can give as we have opportunity. For example, my wife and I, we support a couple missionaries, and that comes out of our bank account every first day of the month, right? So as we have opportunity, giving can be done when we see a need. When we, for example, the children's home came, right? You can send one of those envelopes to them. So as we have opportunity, and we are to give regularly. In Acts 2, 44 through 46, Acts 2, 44 through 46, it says, and all that believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men as every man had need. And then the next verse it says, and they continuing daily with one accord in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, and did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. So they were worshiping and working for the Lord every single day. Every single day. So giving as a regular act of worship. The last point I had here for my sermon was, how much are we to give? So the religious world often says that you have to give a tithe of your income. They will say that you have to give 10% of your income. However, whenever we look to the New Testament, there's no New Testament command for Christians to tithe. So the religious world has a misunderstanding of how New Testament Christians are to give. So we looked at the scriptures earlier on how we are to give. But the religious world, they're going to go to the Old Testament to support the idea of tithing. Of course, we're under the New Testament law now. We are not under the Old Testament. And we're going to look at this more in a couple seconds or minutes, I guess. But under the Old Testament, that tithe, Israel actually gave more than 10%. So the New Testament, we're to give as we've purposed in our hearts, as God has prospered us. It's a personal decision. How much you give should be in a relation to how much God has made you to prosper. So Old Testament, so the New Testament, you're not going to find a verse in the Bible that says, in the New Testament, that says, thou shalt give 10%, thou shalt give this much money each week, right? But I think if we go to the Old Testament and we look at how they give, how much they gave, I think Romans 15:4, Old Testament written for our learning, I think that we can learn some things from the patriarchal law and the Mosaic law. While we're not under those laws, we can learn from them. So in the patriarchal period, we see two examples of tithing. That's Abraham and then Jacob. So if someone wants to read Genesis 14:20 for me, Genesis 14:20, this is Abraham here. Genesis 14:20.
And blessed be God Most High, who delivered you from your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Now the king was how far? I'm sorry.
That's good.
Okay.
So Abram gave a tenth of his spoils to Melchizedek, priest of the Most High God. And then let's go to Genesis 28:22. Someone wants to read Genesis 28:22 for us.
And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
So Jacob gave 10%. All right, so that was the patriarchal law, right? All right, so now moving to the Mosaic law. According to Moses' law, a faithful Israelite gave between 20 and 33% of his or her income, depending on the specific year in the 7-year sabbatical cycle. Let's go to Leviticus 27, 30 through 32. Leviticus 27, 30 through 32. All right, Leviticus 27, 30 through 32.
The tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Whomever would redeem any of their tithe must add a fifth of the value to it. Every tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod will be holy to the Lord.
So they had different types of tithes. So this was not just 10%. They were giving between 20 and 33% of their income, depending on which year it was in the 7-year sabbatical cycle. So what can we learn from this? So the least anyone ever gave in the Bible and was commended for it was 10% with Abraham and Jacob. The most anyone ever gave and was commended for it was the widow with the 2 mites. She gave 100%. Right? Under the Old Testament, under the law of Moses, they gave 20 through 33%. And in the book of Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews says that the new covenant is a better law, right? So you can imagine those Jews on Pentecost when they were converted. And do you think that they said, I'm a Jew now, I don't live under the Old Testament law, that means that I can give less, right? Because I'm not under this old law, I can give however much I want. No, in Acts 2, they sold and they gave to every man as he had need. You saw how liberal they were in their giving, right? So the New Testament, a better law, right? So ultimately, as Christians, how much we give is a personal decision. These are just some Old Testament verses that we can learn from. They're not binding for us today. As long as we give, as we've purposed in our hearts, as God has prospered us, 1 Corinthians 16:2 and 2 Corinthians 9:7, we give willingly, sacrificially, and cheerfully.